Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. At least I hope you can find something to be happy about today. I know there are many people across the world who are disappointed with the recent election results in the United States, but we are not going to talk about that here. This is a place to find escapism, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to keep talking about books. And today I have got a fantastic author for you. He is a multi-award-winning historical fiction author and just an incredible person. So we're going to go ahead and get straight to the interview today, but as always, don't forget to hang around to the very end because we have got some incredible things to share with you. But for now, let's get right to it. Please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart, Sebastian Dureaux-Russell. I always just like to start the episodes by having my guest explain who you are and what you do.
Well, greetings, Dianne. Thank you for having me on Book Banter. My name is Sebastian Dureaux-Russell. I'm management consultant on the operations team at the Braille Institute for the Blind in Florida. I am also the award-winning author of the novel Burning with a Blue Flame, a historical fiction centering on a bromance between a race car driver and an ex-World War I barnstorming pilot set in the world's most famous beach, Daytona, 1925. Do you want to go for a ride or a ride?
Okay, I'm literally sitting over here with my jaw open because I have been reading about you to get ready for this interview. I never read anything about you working for the Braille Institute.
It's a brand new job. I was working for a university before this, but it's brand new.
Okay, now we definitely need to get into this because you have had a varied career. I mean, starting with your education, you have an incredible education background as well.
Well, okay. One thing that I definitely need to say that people would need to know about me is school was always very difficult. I was not diagnosed with a learning disability until I was in my early 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Recent. But I had a really hard time in school. And so as it turns out, I was undiagnosed dyslexic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there are 12 different kinds of dyslexia, and I don't have the traditional one, and that's usually hereditary. So you might have been aware of it, but mine was trauma related. You can get it from either like a brain injury or... So my father died when I was 6 years old, and we were overseas, and we had to drop everything and come back to the United States in like the next 4 days. And then I was living in a new country, a new state, a new home, and starting first grade.
Ugh.
When you learn everything.
Yeah.
And immediately I had problems with my handwriting, which people still make fun of, and I've been criticized for it my whole life. But as it turns out, when I finally discovered that I was dyslexic in my 40s, I have 5 different kinds.
Wow.
Yeah. And people, if you're not the traditional dyslexia, people will usually have more than one.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I have 5. If they discover this when you're young, they can teach you different ways of learning.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't, you will withdraw, you will become, let's say, a loner and also resent education. And yeah, I did all that. I became all those things. So school was bad until I decided to go to Duke Ellington School of the Arts. And that was in high school. And in regular high school, I had been in the drama club and all the plays. I was always torn between wanting to be a writer and a photographer or an actor. And this all started around 6th grade. I started writing poetry and messing around with cameras and then acting. So I wanted to be a better actor, and I was getting roles in all the plays, and I'm not complaining, but I wanted to be a character actor.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be Lionel Barrymore, not John Barrymore.
Yeah.
And so when the movie Fame came out, I saw it, and it was all in the summer between 10th and 11th grade, these huge changes. And I had a friend who had gone to Duke Ellington a couple of years before that. So I wrote my audition, which I think is prophetic now. It was all about a teenager shooting up heroin in a bathroom. And I got into Duke Ellington. But see, already at that point, my schooling was troubled. Like my report cards, they read like a Richter scale.
Oh, wow.
A to F, the whole gamut from A to F. And I don't have a problem with reading or comprehension. I took speed reading in sixth grade. In sixth grade, I was reading an 11th grade reading level, but my math was at a first grade. So that's how my schooling went. It's amazing to me now, knowing what I know and being able to piece it all together, is that no one recognized this. The signs were all there. But anyway, let's move on. So in high school, I was skipping school one day, and I discovered this book in the library called This Fabulous Century in 1920 to 1930. And that's when I became obsessed with the 20s. F. Scott Fitzgerald in particular, I read everything I could get my hands on by him. He became my new writing idol. As a photographer, there was a photo in there called Flaming Youth, brazenly smoking cigarettes in Coney Island. And it was men and women, and they all had their hair bobbed and slicked back, and they all had on the tank bathing suits and little cigarettes in the corner of their mouth. And I think maybe because the 80s was, Generation X was like an androgynous decade. It's like the Lost Generation, that I went, oh, holy cow, this is the coolest picture I've ever seen in my life. That would have a major influence on me.
It seems to like be very played out in the media images that you sent to me of you.
Very much so. I'm very, very visual. I do have an artist eye and something to do with photography, but it's always been black and white. And I'm sure it's part of that developmental thing. But I just see things in black and white, and I'm always drawn to it. So in my senior year, I did a presidential scholarship. I auditioned for it. And I did a great runaway thing. Again, that was my big go-to when I was a teen. And I was very new wave. I was very much into that bleached hair, buttons on the lapel. In fact, my nickname at Duke Ellington was Hollywood.
Nice.
But I did this audition from the Runaways, and I got courted, Dianne, then by every school on the planet that had a theater department. And I'm talking Harvard, Yale, the Royal Academy in London.
That's amazing.
It was an incredible audition. I wish I could find a videotape of that. But the sad thing was, Dianne, I knew I'd get into none of it because of my GPA, my SATs. I saw a psychiatrist in ninth grade. Those were the dark periods, 9th, 10th. And he did my IQ, and it was extremely low. And the reason is I don't test well. This is a part of dyslexia. I test horribly bad, and I got really low SATs. And another thing about not being diagnosed when you're young and early on is you start feeling that you're stupid. And this was a thing my entire life, not just myself, but other people. So that was the sad thing. It was this crux. It was like, I won't get into any of those schools. So when everyone went away to college, all my brilliant friends, I moved back to Virginia and started retail jobs, minimum wage, record stores mostly. And I was very, very bitter and resentful. I wrote my first novel during that period when I was 24. I wrote it in 3 months because I thought F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote This Side of Paradise in 3 months. So I'm like, this is your benchmark, right?
Nothing like a challenge.
Yeah. Well, I'm a voracious reader. So if I read something, I take it as this is the word. You must have this. So I was working at Telecommunications Network for the Deaf. So how interesting is that? Like, now I work on behalf of the blind, and I was working on behalf of the deaf then. I was a supervisor there. I worked with a colleague named Claire. She was a writer, and she became my mentor. And I wrote a short story about a teenage runaway. And she said, "This should be a novel." And I said, "Okay, how do I do that?" So she said, "Your first 50 pages have to grab a publisher's attention or they won't read the rest of your book. More than halfway through the book, you're going to need to have a climax and then get out of there as soon as possible and wrap it up." And I was like, "Is this a sex talk? Or this sounds like a sex talk." And I said, and oh yeah. Then she said, "At some point, your characters will come to life, and they're going to start directing the book." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay." And that's it. I mean, that right there, Diane, is the instruction I've had my entire life on how to write a book. Never
Wow.
took never took a writing class, comprehension, any of it. I'm not an English major, none of that. So all I could remember is doing an English composition in regular high school. So I'm a plotter. I
Mhm.
know one of your questions, because that's what I had to do. That's all I could think of. I'm like, okay, I had read enough literary criticism on Fitzgerald and Sylvia Plath, another big idol, and also in drama, you create backgrounds for your characters. So I knew we had to go from A to Z.
Mhm.
So it was called Spent Youth, and it was all about a teenage runaway who goes to Washington, D.C. for a summer and becomes a male prostitute. And it was written very much in the manner of the bell jar.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was great. I had somebody read it. They said, great, sparse narrative. It was very spicy, if you will.
Mhm.
And my mother wouldn't read it. And I thought, well, if your mom can't read it, then what good is this book? I felt shamed by the sexuality of it. And I just stuck it in a box and forgot about it. I'm thinking now, though, of making this one of my releases, like maybe my last. Releasing exactly as is, spelling mistakes, errors, because it was not in a computer, you know.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking of just releasing it as is. This was the naive, which I am, naive writer with no writing background, first book as is.
That would
At
actually
20,
be really interesting.
right? I think it would be fun, and because I read it again recently, and I said, you've got your beginning, middle, and end. The characters did to come to life. They
Mhm.
created a climax I didn't plot. So I did everything you were supposed to do. So I think it's pretty good.
I think that would be really interesting just to kind of like to release it almost as a memoir of your past writer self.
Yeah. So after that, after I wrote that first novel, I finally got myself to New York. So I arrived in New York into the cheapest apartment I could afford in the meatpacking district, Chelsea. I auditioned for the Actors Studio and I was accepted, but I couldn't afford the tuition.
Oh,
So here we are again, just not taking advantage of these things that are coming my way because again,
mhm.
I just don't think I was worthy or whatever. So instead I became a model for John Casablancas. I did runway modeling for Macy's and Bloomingdale's.
Wow.
It's no big whoop. It was like high school. Again, it was always like prom theme. I was always just a guy in a tuxedo
But
with
that's still cool. I
pretty
mean, it
girl.
had to have been a fantastic experience.
Uh, Dior Turn. That's all I'm going to say. How to finesse, what is it called? A Dior Turn. And that walking foot over foot thing. I don't even know what that's called, but it's very difficult to do that. When I moved to New York, I also tried to write my second novel. You know how the second one is always the hardest? Have
Hmm.
you've heard that? Uh,
I've
um,
experienced that.
yes. Okay. So it was really tough. And I decided it was going to be that 20s novel. And then it was going to be a vampire love story called A Dream of Innocence, set in Long Island in the 1920s. And I still have the short story from it, which I read again recently. And I went, wow, three of my main characters are in that short story. It's all there.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I also made that author photograph of mine, spoofing that image from this fabulous century with me in the
Hmm.
60s and all that I had done in my 20s in New York. but it never got any further than that. I never completed it, and so I'm a kind of a completion freak. Have you heard of Stephen Tennant?
Yes.
Okay. He was the person they based Sebastian on and Brideshead Revisited. And I had read a book on him in high school, how he tried to write this book for his entire life and never completed it.
Mm-hmm.
So badly that they couldn't even put it together like The Last Tycoon. And that was one of my fears again since high school was like, don't ever not complete a book. So since I didn't complete it, I destroyed everything except for that short story. I have nothing from it other than that. So I did some extra work. I was in Howard Stern's Private Parts. I did local parts on cable channels. And then I had a particularly disastrous audition for the film American History X.
Oh, wow.
With Edward Norton.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so down on myself because I gave a bad audition that I was like, you can't act. You must stop. You now need to be behind the camera instead of in front of the camera because you couldn't do what they wanted you to do. I was, again, just really brutal on myself. I'm like, you must stop. So I enrolled at the International Center of Photography in New York, and I focused on black and white street photography. So when I wasn't running around the city with a camera around my neck trying to be Dianne Arbus or Margaret Bourke-White, my idols, I became a top concierge at the New York Palace Hotel. Now, that is a historic landmark. It was owned by Leona Helmsley and then the Sultan of Brunei. It's behind St. Patrick's Cathedral. It's 5-star, 5-diamond, and I was basically an ambassador to New York City to rock stars, royalties, and celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
And I also got elected to the board of directors there of the New York City Association of Hotel Concierges. I served as social coordinator and then vice president. One of the perks there was all the travel magazines that I worked with asked me to write travelogue for them. And I didn't realize that, again, here was this opportunity. Like, I could have turned that into a column, but I just say, hey, I need a page on what to do in New York City. And I would write for Wear Magazine in New York, City Guide, Travel Weekly, the New York Times. My words and my photos they would take. And
wow.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that I was doing this. Again, somebody with like a journalism degree in New York City would fight tooth and nail to get a word.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
right?
I'm a journalism major. I have a degree in journalism. I took journalistic photography classes. I would have killed for those jobs.
Yeah. Wear Magazine was particularly great because I was a member of Les Clés d'Or, which is the International Concierge Association. It's those gold keys you wear on your lapel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That means you can do this anywhere in the world. It's a big criteria.
Wow.
And they have international congresses. So I went to 2 of those. I went to one in Morocco and one in the Philippines. And Wear Magazine took the travelogue from that, the photos and the writing. And they're the best photographs I ever took in my life, in fact. But so finally I'm doing something, I'm living the life of a rich person in New York, even though I wasn't rich.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I came to New York City with $20 in a suitcase. And when I left, I owned a brownstone on 112th Street in Harlem.
Wow.
So that's the A to Z of New York. I left it shortly thereafter, though. I did one of those crazy rolls of the dice where you actually end up losing. And I sold the brownstone to high the market, and I moved to Kauai, the island of Kauai in Hawaii. And that's where I was being hate crimed in Hawaii, which reminded me of my oppressive youth in Virginia. That's where I'm from. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't felt that horrible and that persecuted since I had lived in Virginia. And I spent 4 years in Hawaii trying to overcome having spear guns brandish at me and get off my island and people leaving hate messages on my fence.
Wow.
Yeah, it cost me my 20-year marriage. And the poem I wrote, Ethan Frome Sled, that you so graciously published in Book Banter Magazine, April-May issue, that addressed that time period. And chewing off my paw to get out of a trap. I had to get off of that island.
Wow. Knowing that backstory, that takes a whole different meaning to that poem now. I mean, I
Yeah,
loved it even without knowing the backstory, but now I love it even more.
it really it is a great poem, and it did summarize all these classical things that were attached to that, all these famous writing instances. But I also wrote two books there, Diane, to keep myself from losing my mind.
Hmm.
And one of them was called Billy in the Garden, and that it focused on a Matthew Shepard like character who is hate crimed, savagely beaten up, left for dead, but he ends up living and he joins a gay vigilante group. Now, is that a plot or what?
Yeah.
And so, again, I conceived it because of what I was going through, and I had seen Details magazine, in fact, on the island. I'm like, oh my God, a bit of New York. And the human interest page was always the last page, and it was on this gay vigilante group somewhere in the Midwest or Texas. And all those people wore pink triangles on their jackets. And I thought, holy cow, like that's a novel. And so I took it, I said it in Virginia, of course. I made a connection, a writing person. His name is Rudy Wilson. He's an award winning author who wrote The Red Truck. And he was helping me edit this through a friend I knew. And he read the first 10 pages of Billy and the Gun, and he was like, this is brilliant. You're the next Faulkner. And I was like, oh, great. You know, I'm going to be published. I'm brilliant. And then I sent him the next 10 pages, and he was like, this is horrible. This is juvenile. It's the worst thing I ever read.
Wow.
Yeah, it was my first instance with a real tough love kind of editor. It wasn't jiving very well because of what we were both going through. Major respect to him, Rudy. But we ended up going from making a line edit to he's like, I'm just going to make an assessment. You pay me and we're done, you know? And so I pushed to get the novel done. It was in the year that I was going to leave Kauai, as it turns out, and everything was falling apart. And I'm trying to finish this book. And so I pushed to finish it. I know I was doing that, but the assessment was really brutal, really brutal. And so, of course, like everything else, I took it, finished the book, copyrighted it, stuck it in a box, never looked at it again. I read that again recently, and I went, oh my gosh, this is so relevant. It's always going to be a relevant story, unfortunately, but it needs to be told. And I don't even remember writing it.
Oh, wow.
Like, it's like one of the first times I was starting to do a little bit of research in the computer and, you know, trying to type it into the computer, but I'm still writing it handwriting. And I read it now, and it's that voice. It's my poetical voice.
Hmm.
It's that Sylvia Plath, matter of fact, bitter edge,
Hmm.
who I'm not anymore. So when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember writing half of this stuff. He's the son of a preacher as well. And I had all these biblical references in there, and it's a moral story, Diane, about what's he going to do with the rest of his life. You know, is he going to self-defend himself in the future? Is he going to take up a gun against his adversaries? But I was so deeply into everything falling apart in my world that I almost like Stephen King. He wrote, what was it? Cujo. In a complete drunken stupor, doesn't remember writing a page of it.
That,
But
that explains a lot of the book, too.
yeah, right. There's just some really great stuff going there. What I have to do, I'm like, you can do this now, Sebastian. You know, you've self-edited your own work. You know how to fix things. I didn't know how to fix things. That's part of that dyslexia thing. I'm like, it's messed up. I don't know what to do with it. I'm just going to leave it sitting there. Now I'm like, the idea of going back and making this maybe my next release, I could fix it, and I could even still use the things that he praised me for. I could still use that in a review, and I can still use his assessment. I paid for all this, so turning that frown upside down now, to me, I think would be a wonderful thing, and help other people.
Well, and I think it's fair to say that you have obviously become a very talented writer, because how many awards has Burning with the Blue Flame won now?
It has won 6 and 5 finalist placings. So basically, I'd come back to the mainland after Hawaii. I landed in the lake house in Pennsylvania in the Poconos, 2 worst winters in 200 years. And I started working in hospitals. The idea was to move to Florida because that's where my mother was. I knew eventually I'd take care of her, which I am now. So I was projecting already, you're going to move to Florida, you're going to find your next love there, and everything's going to happen there. So when I finally moved to Florida, everything just fell immediately into place. I met my partner there, who's Michael. We were 7 years together now. Woohoo! And I started wanting to write that 20s novel again to me. It came to me mowing my mother's yard. The title came, the characters, I knew the ending, and I was like, I'm going to set it here in Daytona. And then I was like, yeah, wasn't there some kind of racing history here? I vaguely recall this NASCAR thing. But when I started the research, which for me, research is the cure for writer's block. Mm-hmm. Anytime I got stuck and I just go back into the research and it pulled me right out of it into the next place or somewhere down the line. But I was house hunting and I kept finding these houses over on Daytona Beach that had speakeasy basements.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they were so cool. And Spanish Revival is my favorite. And I was finding houses that were made completely out of coquina rock. And Al Capone's mistress's house was on sale in New Smyrna Beach, is right next door. And when I discovered the history of that, I was like, oh my God, this has to go into this book. He set his mistress up. He was in Miami. She's in New Smyrna Beach. He can come up the Intercoastal. It had a huge basement, brick houses that were made from Capone's bricks in Chicago. And down this canal, they would deliver the alcohol to her house.
That's amazing.
I know. And there's nothing more fascinating than a town that is like founded on illegal activity. Yeah, the research just started really coming together. Humboldt's my race car driver. He's a chic. He's very Valentino. He's also a gambler. He had a romance with the female race car driver, Veronica Vandervoort. She is Hemingway all the way. She is a Lady Brett Ashley character. She was so easy to write and so ever present with her voice. I always heard it. Whenever I needed Ronnie to come in somewhere, she was there and talking. Zella is a wing walker. She's blonde. She's Fitzgerald through and through. She is our moral compass. She, again, is the little girl coming to the city with the big dreams of fame. And Elmer Darrell is our lead. And the name Elmer I took from Benny Goodman. And he has a song called Elmer's Blues. And the first time I heard that, I went, is he really saying Elmer? Like, this is a cool name to this hip 40s song? And I went, oh yeah, you got to name a character Elmer, make it cool. And after the first draft, that took a year. So for me, with all my other books, they were always written in 3 months. A year was a big commitment of writing. And I had my older brother, Lawrence, read it because he's an ex-Marine and a voracious reader. We all are. Mm-hmm. And he had it was a very Katie Way We Were moment to Hubble where he's like, the characters, you watch them from a distance. And I'm like, okay. He's like, I don't buy Elmer. He doesn't talk like a soldier. He doesn't react like a soldier. I'm not buying your character. So I was like, okay. Again, criticism, I don't take it well ever.
Mm-hmm. Same
again,
here.
Well,
it's like after a day or two, I appreciate it, but not at the moment.
No, for me, again, it was always that authority thing, when someone making me feel stupid, mm-hmm. Which is, it turns out, quickly after I self-diagnosed myself in my early 40s and then did the dyslexia testing, I did the IQ again, and it's 142. Mm-hmm. So,
and that's not unusual.
No, it's not. But it's just kind of ironic. And writing this book, I will also say, this book made me feel intelligent for the first time in my life, mm-hmm. like really intelligent. So I took his criticism this time and I said, I'm going to change that. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha, bro. We don't want to be vague. He
Mhm.
was written like Anthony Blaine. He was more an observer, Elm. And I wanted him to be calm, like this name Elm, like he's a tree.
Mhm.
He's an earth sign. And that's not me. That's my partner, Michael.
Mhm.
I am definitely more the humble, cuckoo, drinking, smoking, right? So I'm like, I'll switch these personality traits. Elm will look like me, but behave like Michael.
Mhm.
So I said, well, in rewriting Elm, I'm going to give him my most masculine characteristics, like the growl. The first thing I came up with was like, when I get angry, I growl.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a physical description. That's great, a growl. And then I was like, I will also make him a big part my brother Lawrence. Because there you go, Lawrence. I'll take your criticism and I'll up you one. I'm gonna, I'm gonna make you this character with it's all the bravado of Elm is Lawrence. I'm the biggest, the baddest, the meanest of all my mother's children. That kind of yay though I walk through the valley, that stuff. So, and then a little bit of Harrison Ford. There was a little dash of Harrison Ford and like Douglas Fairbanks,
Mhm.
and give him some swashbuckle. This guy fought in a war. He should be even more dynamic. So it took probably 6 to 8 months to do. That's rewriting the whole book a second time because everything about that character has to change. All of his reactions changed. Everything.
Yeah.
And I did again a classic second rewrite, plump up. More is more better, right? It was 450 pages when I
Oh,
was done.
wow.
Yeah, it's this big old behemoth. And that's when I said I need help. And I'm finally going to ask for help, Dianne, because that's how serious I am about finally writing this great American novel that I knew was in there all the time. I always believe that. I'm one of those people. But I was like, I am committed. So I started working with one of those big editing publishing conglomerates. I won't mention the name. But the editors there started pushing me in a direction I didn't want to go in. They
Mhm.
started, you should be this male on male smut genre, or we see this as like summer reading, a summer romance. And I'm like, no. And they're like, sex it up. This needs a lot of
Mhm.
sex. And I'm like, I'm writing it as though it was written in 1925.
Yeah.
That was, yeah, that was my goal. So I'm like, not so much of that happening there. But I said, all right, again, these people are dangling carrots in front of me, publishers, and they must know better. They've been doing this forever. All right, how do I do this? So I went into this whole research of sex in classic literature. And I discovered, yes, there was a few examples of it. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to do this my way then. It's got to be character revealing. It's got to fit the 20s. It needs to be rompy, stompy, fun.
Mhm.
Whereas in before, I was implying it was implied in the first draft through these 1920 song lyrics. And I wanted to educate people on the cadence of poetry, which, is song lyrics. But I'm like, all right, well, just take those scenes where you set it up and you intimated it and you just make it. So I rewrote that. And instead of bringing it back to them, I decided to go in another direction. I started working with a New York editor, Jay Blotcher. And Jay's been doing it for 20 years in the LGBT community. He was just a great help. And he got me down to like 225 pages. Like, let's trim all the fat off of this. I had made 3 glossaries in that second rewrite of plumping, one on 1920s lingo, one on early flight terminology, and then one on World War slang. So I had this huge encyclopedia, and I'm like, I'm brilliant. This is look at. I mean, me, the pinhead with like 3 glossaries. And so Jay's like, right there, I lost something like 75 pages. He was just a great help at getting this thing streamlined. I knew I had to do a fourth rewrite because I wasn't pleased with it. Didn't look like a book yet.
Hmm.
And I still felt like the sex was too much. This has always been one of those things where I was like, I'm limiting my audience here. I want everybody to have something here. Like, Elm is the only gay character in there. Ronnie and Humboldt are both bisexual. Zella's straight up straight. And I'm like, it's really outnumbered here. So I was going to have to do a fourth rewrite. This book took 4 years to write, 4 complete rewrites. They're like 4 separate novels.
That is just
And
incredible, the amount of work that you went through. But I mean, obviously, people enjoy what it is that you distilled it down to.
I was afraid to bore people, Diane. I'll be honest. I was like, as a writer, I'm like, please just don't be boring, Sebastian, whatever you do. So I started working with new editors, Chris and Dawn Hagblom. Chris is a writer. He's written several books. Dawn, she worked at the library where I was, and she was an assistant librarian, and she's also an editor. And these two just took me under their wing, completely coddled me, completely were like believing in my story, the integrity of actually trying to write classic literature. They totally understood it, and they were like, we're going to help you out. And they really did. I mean, it wouldn't be the book it was if they had not come along and helped me. They're simply wonderful people. So I did a rewrite. I took out a lot of sex. I did. I was like, I cut it way back. Working with Chris and Dawn, again, they got it to look like a book. They got it into book format. I decided that I was going to self-publish, and they're like Ingram Spark. We work with them. They're great. They have a very difficult format though. And again, I was like, I'm not going to be able to do that. And they're like, well, we'll help you. So they literally pried it out of my hands. It was that whole, was it Picasso? A masterpiece isn't finished. Like I worked on it like a demon every day for hours for 4 solid years, even as they're taking it out of my hands. I made 3 revisions to it, even after it came out.
I have this like image in my head of them like trying to pull the book out of your hand, slapping you away, going, no, it's done. Stop it. Stop it.
Yeah, because, well, I desperately wanted it to be perfect, even if it was self-published. I wanted to be good as any big-time publishing company out there. I was proving something to myself, which, again, everyone's like, well, that's all you needed to do, or that's all you're doing. And I'm like, it wasn't. It was very old friends of mine, family members that I was like, you watched me struggle, and they didn't know what, this learning disability or anything, but they all watched me struggle. And I was like, I am doing this for them as well. I want people to be proud of me. I want them to say, oh my gosh, look at this great thing you did. And I was really writing for other people. Anyway, yes, that's part of them prying it out of my hands. And it's not perfect. I guess that's a thing too, is we will always look at it and go, oh, that was the wrong word choice, but they finally said, yes, no, it's okay. But I did change it 3 times after it was published.
Now, are you done? Are you going to leave it alone?
Um,
There was a pause in there. You were thinking. You've thought about doing something else, haven't you?
After the first draft, when you go to write the end, and we all live for that, right? You're just waiting. It's so joyful. I started to type it, and what came out was to be continued.
Oh, yeah.
And I went, what? What does that mean? And I conceived a trilogy in my head. So there could be a follow-up. It's called Devil on the Wing. I have the whole outline. I've plotted that, Diane. And it's copyrighted. And it's basically Elma's going to be doing an around-the-world flight via Herbert Hoover, who is in Calvin Coolidge's staff, which I just discovered. And I went, Hoover? Oh my, that's what I need. Like, he's going to say, you will do foreign espionage, and we will give you a plane to fly around the world. So now we have foreign espionage instead of bootlegging. Fun, huh?
I like that.
Woohoo! But
I'm a big fan of espionage stories.
Well, both of my parents, worked for the government, and when we lived overseas, that's in the blood too. It's got to be in my blood. So it can be a lot of fun. That would be the sequel, and then there could be a third. But so yes, there's many things to come. I'm thinking of maybe doing the screenplay next for Burning with a Blue Flame because that's the dream goal. There was the baby goals. Your podcast is one of them. Thank
Oh,
you. Thank you so much.
so we know I've been waiting for this interview for quite a while.
Me
Like, because
too.
ever since I found you, because you had put in the poem, because I wanted to start adding poetry to the magazine, and you submitted your poem, and I'm like, yes. And then I saw your book. I'm like, oh my God, this book is cool. We have to do that too.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the time of the show that we always do 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but I just refuse to give up on it. Are
I
you
love
ready?
it. Yes, I am so ready.
So, question 1. Who is your favorite jazz artist?
Wow. Gosh, that is a fantastic question. Definitely Louis Armstrong would be one of those because he kept coming into my 20s music. Bessie Smith.
Yes. Oh, I love Bessie Smith.
Yeah,
I wish
she's
I could
20.
find some vinyls of hers.
I just got 2 Victrolas in the last year, and they were all through the book. So I was like, I need to have a Victrola. Yeah, I got a portable one for the mountain home, and then a big stand up one here. But oh yeah, what's his name? Chet Baker. Even though he's in the 1950s, but Chet Baker is smoothie wonderful. All right, next question.
So, question 2. What is your most meaningful tattoo? Because I know you have a few.
I have a whole back piece. My back piece was on Tattoo Wars.
Really?
Yeah, it followed American Chopper on what is that, TLC?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have a 15 minutes of fame. My back piece it's been in pen and ink
That's
but
cool.
it's Saint Sebastian, and it was a painting from like the 1600s that we adapted to have my hair. My hair is naturally red. So I had this ginger hair halfway down my back with like tendril curls. I'm a descendant of Charlemagne and Ragnar Lothbrok.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So when I had like my long ginger locks, I mean, I just looked completely like a Viking, but we gave it my hair on like a 1600s Italian painting. I did one for Zella on my ankle when I was writing the book.
What is
So
it?
it's a little sailor girl, with her
Oh, okay.
little,
I think I've seen that on your Instagram.
yeah, it's her, yeah, her in her little sailor suit that she wears in one scene. That's a big one. I mean that's commitment again. During the middle of writing this book and all these different drafts, I'm like, okay, I need to get this tattoo for Zella because she's really special.
Question 3. I saw photos of French bulldogs, and you have mentioned them already. Are these yours dogs, and what are their names?
Yes, they're mine and Michael's dogs. I had one before I met Michael that I got in my winter of discontent, and his name is Boris. Boris is brindle, so he's, mostly black
Hmm.
with brindle. And then when Michael and I got together, he wanted to get one himself, and he's very into female dogs. So we imported one from Russia.
Oh, wow.
I know what this dog went through to get here is amazing. And that's Bella. And then Bella had 2 puppies. She had 3. We sold one, but I couldn't bear to separate the other 2. And that's
Hmm.
Humboldt. Humboldt is the boy, and I named him after the character in the book.
Hmm.
And then the little girl, Tallulah.
Oh,
She's like a runt little girl. And oh, but the beauty. She looks like Liz Taylor. She just has the most beautiful face with a little beauty spot on the side of her cheek. And
oh,
and she's alpha.
yeah.
From the minute little Tallulah was born and was this little teeny run of a thing, she directed everything. They were wonderful.
Question 4. What is your favorite thing about photography?
Hmm. Wow. It might. be something to do with, again, being literate, which I really wasn't when
Yeah.
I, picked up cameras at fifth and sixth grade. They were my parents' cameras, and I just immediately wanted black and white film. It was like, we need to go to the store. I need black and white film for this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but I like capturing, again, these moments. I wrote a poem once about it called The Lost Moment, and how if you see these things, and I'm sure you do this as well, it could be, as you're traveling in a boat or a train or whatever, you see images, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, if I only had a camera,
Yes, I do that so often.
right? So that drove me nuts when I was in New York. That's why I just started living with a camera on my neck.
Mm-hmm.
But
I was so grateful whenever the cell phones started having better cameras on them, so that
yes,
if I didn't have my good camera with me, I could at least get a photo that was decent.
yes, I have the 15 now, and the camera is pretty insane. It's
Mm-hmm.
great. And but it's the same thing with photography. Again, I'm self-taught. I used to take the camera with me everywhere when I was in, even in my 20s. I would take it to the bars. I would
Mm-hmm.
constantly shooting pictures of my friends, and it was always black and white.
Yeah.
It's definitely capturing that moment, and it's also a voice, as I said before. Like, you can say something with this.
Mm-hmm.
Like the best pictures I took were in New York, and street photography is what I came to do. And it's very hard to do that, but that to me is being an observer and being able to take a picture and someone's in it, but they're not posing.
Mm-hmm. Now, question 5. I had been planning to ask you who another author is that you would recommend,
Yes, let's do it.
but I think the more important question would be, do you think with all the accolades that you have garnered for this book that you will ever get over imposter syndrome?
Yes. Um, yeah. No, I did. I got over it, I think, after it was published, but I would love to mention a couple of those people if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, the latest, greatest historical fiction that I read is Jeffrey L. Richards' We Are Only Ghosts.
Oh
And
yeah.
have you heard of him?
Yeah, I've heard the book. I didn't remember the author, but I've heard of that book.
It is a dark story about a twisted relationship between an Obersturmführer who takes a teenage Jewish boy. He liberates him out of Auschwitz to become his prisoner in his home and his like personal slave.
Hmm.
Twisted, dark, brilliantly written. So, cheers to Jeffrey L. Richards. I highly recommend that book. And Dan Cowley is my most recent read. His book is called The Player's Lounge, and it's paranormal male on male romance. It's got this metaphysical theme, and I just thought that was so refreshing. Dan Cowley's British. His fame is really in doing audiobooks for people.
Hmm.
He's the voice. And he also is an award-winning podcaster, and Player's Lounge is his first novel.
Now, let's remind everybody who you are, the title of your book, and where they can buy it.
I am Sebastian Dureaux-Russell. I am the author of Burning with a Blue Flame, which is an American historical fiction. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I chose Ingram Spark because they have the widest reach
Hmm.
global. So it's in Germany,
Hmm.
it's in Italy, it's in Japan, it's in Canada, it's everywhere.
Do you have a website?
I do. It's Sebastian Dureaux, Dureaux hyphen Russell dot WordPress.com.
And as always, all of your links to your social media and a buy link for your book will be in the description of today's podcast, as well as on our website, burkhartbooks.com. This has been absolutely fantastic. I cannot thank you so much. This has been something I've been looking forward to for so long.
Me as well. You are wonderful. Many, many thanks, Dianne.
So there you have it, folks. My interview with the incredible Sebastian Dureaux-Russell. Be sure to go out and pick up his book, Burning with the Blue Flame. It has earned so many incredible awards for the fantastic writing in this book. You're going to love it, especially if you like 20s era historical fiction. This is an amazing piece of work. So don't just take my word for it. Go get a copy for yourself and check it out. Now, we do have one little bit of housekeeping. As you know, if you've been following along on our website or our podcast, you know we were running a little contest to help celebrate our 1-year anniversary of Book Banter Magazine, and we gave away a 1-year subscription to the digital PDF version of the magazine for next season for 2025. We did send out an email to let the winner know, but we have not heard back from them yet. So we want to let you know if your name happens to be Eden Robbins, check your spam folder because you won a year subscription to Book Banter Magazine. Now we're going to go ahead and give them at least a month to get back to us. And if we don't hear from them again before the end of the year, we may have to draw for somebody else. But until that time, we hope to hear from Eden Robbins. So check your spam folder and get back to us so we can get you set up to start getting your magazine subscription next season. Now, next week, we're going to be talking with wealth management specialist Chad Willardson. He is a multi-best-selling author, and we're going to specifically discuss his latest book, Wealth Wired Differently. So if you have any questions about entrepreneurship and managing your own wealth, you're definitely going to want to check out this author. And since we're running so long today, I think that might be enough for this episode. Be sure to check back with us next week. And don't forget to check out Book Banter Magazine, available for just $2.99 right now at burkhartbooks.com. So that's it for today, folks. It's time for you all to go forth and try very hard to be happy. And hopefully all of these fantastic authors we are bringing to you will help you to be able to do that. Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today.